Hi, this is Dorothy Kuhn, and with me today is the wonderful Jeffrey Cartwright. He is a principal at Shoreview Advisors. And Jeff, you help companies in the middle market, in addition to being at Shoreview and a principal there now, recently president and COO of Igloo Products. You provided leadership for marketing, product development, manufacturing, distribution, finance, supply chain, and prior to Igloo, you were president and CEO of, do you pronounce that Costco? Is it pronounced differently so that it's not confused with Costco?
Well, unfortunately, it is confused with Costco, but it's Costco without the T.
Yes.
And so Costco Home and Office Products would be the pronunciation.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I wasn't familiar with that firm, which is not uncommon. There are many firms in the middle market, and nobody knows all of them. And you're a seasoned executive with deep operations and general management experience, over 35 years of leading manufacturing, logistics, engineering, sourcing, product development, marketing, and sales for a multinational consumer products firm. Not only that, this is the part that's really cool to me, a West Point graduate, 1973, an MBA from East Carolina University. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Tell our listeners a little bit more about you, how you got started, and what you do now.
Well, first of all, to some extent, my background has set me up a lot to what we do now, in that I have seen a lot of firms, both big and large. I've helped build companies, turn them around, helped grow revenues. But it always comes back to, no matter what the business is, when you look at it, there's always some things that the business does exceptionally well, and you want to continue those as you move in as an executive or someone from the outside to try to help a business. And then there's always a few things that are opportunity areas. And the question is how do you retain the best of what the business does well? How do you discover the opportunity areas, and how do you go ahead and leverage against those? And so having been in the big companies, having done turnarounds, having purchased a number of companies, including some quite small ones, $3, $4, $5, $6 million, $10 million, up to having purchased things in the couple $100 million ranges. You see a variety of great businesses, and you see business, no matter how great the business is, there's an opportunity to improve and to increase profits. And so it's nice to have stepped out of the large company environment and now helping smaller businesses address things, accelerate progress towards the objectives of increasing profits, and then hopefully, providing enough financial resources from that to help grow sales.
Great. We at Dumont Capital do similar work in different parts of the middle market, the smaller end, typically, 2 million EBITDA up to about 50 million. So we're just in a different part of the market. How do you describe, beyond those sizing things, your ideal clients? And I'm really thinking of not so much the size and the staff, but the attitude of the leadership that makes them a really great client.
That's a really good question. I would say, first of all, I do not add value to any client that doesn't have some sort of need or pain points. So the ideal client is one that recognizes, either because they lack the internal resources, they don't want to add permanent staff to address a shortfall area, or they are outside of their skill set in maybe an area that they haven't been in before, so they're struggling with it. So the ideal client is one that recognizes a need. That's the first premise. Second, and most important to me, is one that I can help. So one that I look at and I say, okay, I sort of understand the business problem, and I believe I can add tremendous value there. And that also means that client, in terms of their attitude or where they're at right now, is they're willing to listen, not just listen to me because I say something, but listen to how we've constructed the logic pattern, how we've dug deep into their business to understand their business, how to establish cause and effect relationships between things, and then kind of learn from that discovery and be willing to try different things, and I don't mean this in a high-risk standpoint, but try different things that make logical sense.
Exactly. So you're being a good detective. You've done your digging, so to speak, so that you understand the lay of the land within the company, and you're gonna, based on your wealth of experience, you're gonna see what that pattern is. Every business, even if they're in really different markets and different kinds of products or services, there are patterns to business, and when you've been in a lot of businesses like we have, it's easy to see those, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think every business believes that they're truly unique, and there are special things about the business which distinguish them from their competition and maybe helps them have grown to where they are. But again, back to other things, there are patterns that you see within businesses over time, and I think maybe I've probably been in 1,000 different companies looking around, done due diligence in terms of helping to purchase maybe 100 different companies. But what you see is patterns that develop over time, and those patterns take certain themes. You see stalled growth. Perhaps you see maybe the owner, CEO, trying to do a bit too much, and his reach and span, or her reach and span of control is broader than what can be done well. And so they need help in a particular area. But you see those patterns over time, and you can recognize those and perhaps add value by helping the CEO, owner solve those problems.
I see exactly the same things, and the ability to see those patterns comes partly from all the experience that you've had, and it also comes from not being attached and within that company. It's really hard to see things that are too close because you don't have that arm's length perspective, right?
Absolutely. I think particularly if you've solved difficult problems within the business already, you have not only not having the arm's length perspective, but you're emotionally involved in decisions that have occurred and how you've solved those, and the processes and procedures you've put in place to resolve those and make sure that they don't occur again. What's difficult is, again, to stand back and say, that was the right solution at that moment in time or in that particular set of problems. It's the right process to put in place. What's difficult to see is that's now inhibiting growth or it's holding us back in some area. So it's difficult to see the side effects that have been inadvertently or unintentionally created. Right.
Yes, I see that all the time. And no solution works for every size business. And as the business grows, for example, tweaking a solution that worked when you were smaller is imperative often as you grow bigger and get to that next level. In order to get to that next level, I see companies, and I'm sure you do too all the time, just they'll grow up to a certain point and then they'll crash and go down. Grow up to a certain point, crash and go down. It's like there's this invisible ceiling.
Yes, I would kind of describe it as I would say there's periods of, let's say, chaos, and then there's periods of growth. And it is, in fact, the company grows for a while, they hit some sort of plateau, or they have a customer that's unhappy or something, and so the business is a bit chaotic. It's lost itself for a while. Okay, now it standardizes procedures, protocols, re-examines why it's in business, or what its strategic advantage is. When it figures that out with either internal resources or external resources, it goes back on a growth path, and it runs for a while, and then maybe a couple of years later it hits another plateau, and it takes a period of reorganization. And it doesn't really matter what size business that is. It happens in extraordinarily large ones. We see them grow for a while, and we see them stall. And the question is, again, do you have the introspective, or can you a lot of times acquire the outside perspective that allows you to examine where you are, what the competitive set is right now, what your capabilities are, and then relaunch your business to some extent from that new level.
Oh, that is so well stated. And what I love about your work is your focus on early results when you do an engagement. Tell our listeners a result story that truly delighted a client of yours.
Well, first of all, again, this is back to, do I have the right client and am I the right person to help them? Typically speaking, when I do an engagement with a client, if I'm not returning a minimum of 5, 10, 15 times their investment, I'm disappointed. I do have a active client right now. Well, we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. but we've been engaged with them since the middle of December, and there are, during the period of analysis and looking at things, there are easy things that come to mind that the client can fix. And we've given him one opportunity, and we've returned sixfold to him on an annualized basis. And here we are, May? And he's already implemented those changes, and those are already put on the bottom line, which more than pays for the little bit of time that we need to go do the further analysis, which in this particular case is going to result in a total savings of about 19 times their investment. And we're going to get all that done in about 8 months. So, and that gives you momentum. Then you have, after you've established the fact that you've helped them, they can go ahead and take those dollars to the bottom line or see how they're materializing. Then there's credibility to move on to maybe more difficult issues or problems to be solved, ones that you wouldn't have had the credibility and trust to begin with, but maybe even bigger issues for the client.
Oh, yes. So when you engage them, what do you do? So people have an idea. What do you do that helps you find where those early wins are to build that credibility and value?
Well, I think there's two aspects. One is having some experience. Again, and experience in my definition is having been out there for a while, having tried things, in a lot of cases having done it wrong and learned from that to go do things differently the next time, hopefully on my dime and not my client's dime. But that's one. And then second is, I think, in order to be effective as an outside resource, you have to have tremendous listening skills. So I want to listen to people. I want to collect information. I want to then kind of construct what I think the mental model is for that business and why we have this problem. And then I want to test it by, going back to the same people that I solicited information and test some thoughts to see if it makes sense, and then sort of validate that. And then if that seems to make sense, then we can dig really deep into other information and sources to go and validate again whether that, in fact, that is the real problem. I do find oftentimes, Dorothy, is that the problem that's described to me initially is sometimes reflective of the symptoms. It's always accurate for the symptoms and the pain.
Right.
Sometimes it's not accurate as for what the real cause is. We think it's here, and upon deeper discovery, we realize that that's where the symptoms are showing up, but the base problem is somewhere else.
I'm with you 100%. The focus that I always have, and like you, I cut my teeth in Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and learned their growth strategies and the patterns of business. It was an extraordinary background to have developed so early in life. And when you're looking, and when you know how to take those symptoms and not treat the symptoms, which is truly the temptation, but to back it up and reverse engineer back to where the likely causes are and test for what they could be, which isn't hard to do. It's really more a mindset and being a really good Sherlock. Then you can solve a problem at the root cause, and the benefits play out in more than one area, typically a handful, and people are just completely wowed by or how one simple change can give you benefits in a whole variety of areas.
Well, you just used a word that I think is very appropriate, simple. In my experience, as you go out there and you look at things, the problem seems to be very complex sometimes. When you continue to collect information, you boil it down, it usually does come down to a simple problem that may have lots of complex effects to it. But taking complexity and reducing it to more of a logic pattern, and again, back in terms of the cause and effect, and I do take a heavy engineering perspective to things in terms of thinking patterns, right. But when you reduce it down to its core elements, it's usually a fairly simple, straightforward problem that needs to be solved. Now, the effects could show up in multiple places throughout the organization, in different functions, in different departments, and affect people differently. But at its core, it's usually fairly straightforward.
Oh, yes. And I bet you've got some. I'd love to hear another example of you were engaged. I'm sure you've been in an engagement where that company had hit the wall, so to speak, and you were brought on board to help them salvage and turn around what was there. What's a good story for our listeners?
Well, I actually have a client that was in Utah that I've worked with over the last 2 years or so. And the company had started out, I don't know, 10 years ago, actually purchased by a private equity company, very well known, and was about $50 million in revenue at the time of the purchase and about 10% in EBITDA at the time of the purchase. And over time, diversified a bit too much. And when I came in, I was hired by the CEO to take a look. It was basically $50 million in revenue, so no growth there. Very complex business, 3 major product lines, and profitability declined to less than 2%. So the key there was to find out what is the core product that they should be emphasizing,
Right.
what makes that product special, why does the sales team feel compelled to offer things outside of the core, and it's because basically they don't understand their numbers in this case. They don't understand that the one product line was driving probably 90% of the profitability, and had they centered up on that, they wouldn't have added a lot of additional products, a lot of additional inventory, a lot of additional overhead, and distracted from growing the core business. And when we got it focused a bit more narrowly on the core business,
Right.
then what do you know? We're delivering better on the core value proposition that built the business. And so
Well,
it's
that
pretty
is a
easy to
darn
get the
good
growth
thing.
mode.
I'm sorry, I talked over you. Say again?
I said it was pretty easy for them to get back to a growth mode in their core original business.
And, it comes back down to being a really good detective, a good scientist of your business. And measurement is key. If you're not measuring your various product lines and what your profitability and costs are associated with each of those product lines, then you can't make a well-informed decision.
I think that's critical. As the business gets more complex, let's say it adds more product lines, more customers, more channels, there's still a certain amalgamation of the information that you need to close the month, report earnings, pay taxes, or whatever. The more that becomes an amalgamation and everything gets mixed together, the less clear it is to, what is the profitability of a particular customer or product line or segment. And I find there's too much smoothing over the data, which means you lose sensitivity on the information. Right. And you're no longer to make those finite decisions that you were able to make before because you simply don't have the information available in that format.
Right. It's kind of all averaged into a mush, so to speak.
Yep, and that makes it difficult then to know whether the decision you're making is right or wrong.
It truly does. And I really appreciate your engineering point of view. You and I have kind of similar backgrounds. If I recall correctly, you did your work at West Point in, was it mechanical engineering?
Yeah, I'm a mechanical engineering focus. And then, just to go ahead and credential the engineering things, in some of the bigger companies, I do have some equipment patents and some product patents. I have some products out at the retail shelves right now that are patented. And I wouldn't characterize myself as a great engineer so much as a great adapter of ideas, taking an idea from one business or one process I've seen, going into another business and bringing that idea forward and applying it if it makes sense. And then so more of a adapter than a pure creative person in terms of that for engineering.
Very, very good. And, that honestly is the way that the arc of human history has gone forward. We stand on of those who have come before us, don't we? I did my undergraduate work in physics, so science is all about patterns. Engineering has huge pattern components in it. It's important, and it applies to every area of human life. And when we're savvy to what that means in business, we can really do a lot of work. So here's my next question. How do you fortify owners so that when you get a chance to talk with owners, how do you give them some vitamins for the mind, so to speak, so that they're fortified with what to look for so they know when to give you a call before they hit the wall?
Again, an excellent question, and I'm not sure. Most of the time I get called, there's already, blood in the water, it's troubled business. And so, but I would suggest this in terms of any business owner. they need to understand that they've done some things incredibly well. They've taken some incredibly risky entrepreneurial activities to get the business to where they're at. They've done a lot of good things to begin with and to get the company to the position it's at, even if it's struggling. And I think they need to walk away with that perspective. Is I've done some pretty good things and things that are admirable, and now we're struggling in a few areas. It's not all bad, and rarely is a business bad in every area. It has a few problems, a few dilemmas that are standing between it and progress. So I don't think I can answer that question directly because I've not been called, but let's say by a healthy business that's doing extraordinarily well, I don't typically talk with those folks.
Right.
But I would say this, if a business owner is curious, if they can step back from it from time to time, if they can take a vacation and think about their business in terms of where they've been and where they want to go, those are probably really healthy.